All right. How's everybody doing this morning? Wet, right? All right. So, did everybody get a chance to go through the readings? Any questions over the readings? All right. Let's go ahead and we'll start our quiz then. All right, I have everybody's quiz, right? All right, so how was the Civil Rights Act passed? And what was its impact? Let's start with what is its impact. What does the Civil Rights Act do?
It ended racial segregation
Okay, where?
in all of America.
Okay, so for places that have interstate business, right? So let's walk through how things are changing. First, you change the military, you change the schools, then you start changing interstate transportation, and now you're changing anything that has interstate commerce. So what has interstate commerce? What would be a good example of that? Nobody wants to throw something out. Okay, if I had a hotel or a motel, does that have interstate commerce? Okay, so if I have someone who is from a different state who shops there or stays there, that would be interstate commerce, correct? Why does this matter?
Almost everywhere has interstate commerce.
Okay, almost everywhere has interstate commerce, and you have people from states that segregation is not enforced in these areas, and so you're saying, hey, if there's a differentiation between what the states allow, then you have to go with the federal law. So, all right. How is it passed? So Johnson, we kind of talked about this before. Johnson uses the death of Kennedy, and then he uses the Johnson technique, and we will walk through that a little bit more in class. All right. So let's start out with Freedom Summer. What has occurred in the past for civil rights? What have we walked through so far? What have you seen with civil rights movements?
Peaceful protests.
Peaceful protests. Look, throw out a couple of examples. Is there any woman that you guys would recognize? Rosa Parks. What does she do? Okay, she stays in her seat on the bus and refuses to move, and she's arrested. All right, what else? Okay, Martin Luther King, and so he's starting to do peaceful protests. What about the Woolworths? Do you guys remember the Woolworths? People sitting in the Woolworth seat to be served food. They're not going to be served food. So now they're going to just sit there until someone does take care of them, right? So we see more and more actions by people who are trying to be treated fairly. You have the Freedom Bus rides, right? Where people are riding the bus all the way through the South, sitting in the seats that are not segregated. You have people who come down to help vote. And this is what we will see this time, is you have Freedom Summer. Many college students, primarily, there's some high school students as well, but they will come down to Mississippi to help people get registered to vote. Now, realistically, do you think that African Americans in Mississippi are excited and happy to have them come down? Okay, I'm getting a no. Why not?
Because they're just going to be more violent to the African Americans.
Okay, so the comments come back. You come down here and you create a problem because people are angry with us, and then you walk away, but we're left here to deal with the problems. So the college students go down. What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to, uproot society and change the world? In one way, actually, yes. What is their goal, though? What do they want at the end of the summer?
The Civil Rights Act.
Okay, they want people to be able to vote. That's the main thing. They are going to help people register to vote, right? So is this like a crazy maniacal thing that we're just trying to force things down the throats of other people? No, they're trying to get people to vote. And yet, to the people in these states, yes, this is a crazy maniacal thing. Why are you letting African Americans vote? It's funny because I keep reading things about, the Civil War wasn't over slavery, and I go, well, all right. One, if you look at the secession statements of each of the states, 13 of the states, I believe, have in their secession because we want slavery, or because the North will not let us keep slavery. So if you ignore all that and you want to move forward, the fact that people don't want someone to vote is a huge sign that there's a real problem. So we go back, we bring all these students coming down into the South, and what they're trying to do is get people to vote, right? Why will African Americans not vote or register to vote? A lot of times, if they register to vote, their businesses, they will be fired, or their house could be burned down. There's a lot of ways that people enforced the intimidation. They can be arrested for different things. And in fact, we will talk about that further. But in Selma, Alabama, 2% of the African Americans who were eligible to register to vote were registered to vote. Out of 15,000 people, only 300 were registered to vote. And that's primarily because the sheriff was enforcing you will not vote. Other leaders of the area were enforcing if you try to register to vote, we will make your life miserable. So you bring down these people from the North. How do the Southerners feel about this? They say, no, this is just like Reconstruction. You guys are attempting to do the same thing as you did under Reconstruction 80 years ago, which is force us to treat African Americans like regular people. I know, it's really shocking. So huge violent response. In fact, within a few weeks, a couple of people are murdered that have come down. There are the places that people gather to register or to teach the people are burned down. And so this becomes a very violent thing. However, it also pushes the king and the SCLC to push harder. And so it increases their desire to get African Americans to vote. And so you see people gathering. One of the things that happens is February 18th, you have a demonstrator who is demonstrating for the right to vote. His mother is getting beat up, and so he goes to protect his mother, and he is shot by a state trooper. This creates even more heightened response. And so Martin Luther King decides, you know what? We're going to march from Selma, which is one of the areas that has the lowest voting rate, to Montgomery. Why would they go to Montgomery? It's the capital. And you have the federal government offices there, right? So you can register with the federal government. All right? So they're going to march. If I remember right, this is like 54 miles. It is a ways, but they decide, you know, we're going to go ahead and we're going to march there. They start in the city and they start marching. And one of the first places they get to is the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The Edmund Pettus Bridge is actually named after the Grand Dragon of the KKK in Alabama. So you already have that. As they get to the bridge, the police are there and they say, you're going to disperse. Is it illegal to walk down a road, a public road? No. Why do they want them to disperse? What's their goal?
To stop the march.
They want to stop the march because this march is going to get people registered to vote and highlight the fact that things are, people are being treated badly in the South. So they go ahead and they get to the bridge. There's 600 marchers, and the police beat them back. Now, Martin Luther King does one thing that is very, very wise. One, he says, we are not going to be violent, right? Because if you see someone being violent, what do you think about their cause? Kind of makes you question, right? Saying, this person is being violent, they're being, aggressive. Do I trust them? Do I think they're doing the right thing? So he says, you don't be violent. The second thing he does is he brings in news media. Why would he bring in news media? Why would you bring in news media?
He brings in news media to show that everyone else is being violent against them.
Yes. So he wants to show all we're doing is walking. And people start beating us up, and the police start beating us up. And this goes throughout the nation so that everybody gets to see what's happening. And they say, wait a minute, this isn't right. So 600 marchers on March 7th. On March 9th, they go again. This time, because so many people have seen what's going on, they add, there's 2,000 marchers. And again, they are stopped by the state police. This time, Martin Luther King Jr. and the other people with him say, Johnson, President Johnson, you have to do something. This is a federal crisis. States are not obeying federal law. So on March 15th, Johnson goes on TV and says, bigotry and injustice is not a Southern problem, it's an American problem. Now, does this mean that it's rampant throughout America? Not necessarily. It means that if one part of our nation is not doing something right and the rest of the nation isn't doing something to correct it, then it's a problem for the whole nation, right? So finally, March 21st, they bring in the army, and the army helps march the people through the bridge, and they camp a couple of places, and they wind up arriving in Montgomery. And by the time they get to Montgomery, if I remember correctly, there is 25,000 people who are marching with them. Now, these people all start registering to vote, and so over 250,000 African Americans are registered to vote in the South that were not registered by the end of the summer. All right. Now, what about the civil rights legislation itself? Like I said, it outlaws segregation in public facilities with interstate business. So, Pancake House, IHOP, McDonald's, right? Those are all businesses that survive on people coming throughout the nation and, hey, I recognize this restaurant, so I'm going to stop here. Does that make sense? All right, how does Johnson get it through? The first thing he does is he'll come up and he'll say, you support the Civil Rights Act, don't you? And you're like, well, I'm not really sure. And he says, President Kennedy really wanted this to go through. Are you saying you hate the president? And you're like, well, no, I never said I hated President Kennedy. And he goes, well, I expect to see your vote in the right direction. And you go, okay, got it. Because otherwise, he's going to spread the word that you hate Kennedy. Can anyone hate Kennedy at this point? No. Kennedy just died. Everybody loves him. And so voters are going to support him. Now, the other method, and I'm going to use this on a volunteer, so I already talked to him, is the Johnson treatment. Are you feeling pretty comfortable? For the most part? All right. So what if I get closer?
A little bit less comfortable.
Yeah. And what happens when I get into your personal space and stand on top of you?
Pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's really uncomfortable. And Johnson comes in and he makes people uncomfortable. He's a tall guy. So you see all of these cases where he leans in and he takes your personal space away from you, right? And he says, this is what I want to do. Johnson was also a pretty crass guy. If he wanted to make you feel uncomfortable, one of the other methods he used, the White House in the Oval Office, it has its own bathroom. Johnson would actually call you into the Oval Office to talk to you. While you were talking to him, he would move into the bathroom, sit down on the toilet, and start going to the bathroom with the door open and make you keep eye contact with him. Now, I don't know about you, that's really not something I'm wanting to be engaged in, right? Why would he do these things that make people feel uncomfortable?
Because they're more likely to agree with him to get out of the situation.
All right, because I'm willing to do whatever I need to get out of that situation. And so he gets people to vote in the way he wants them to by making them uncomfortable. All right, so he creates the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, and they allow the U.S. government to sue or withdraw federal funds from a state or a local area that is not obeying federal law. So this actually, even with all the Johnson technique, this takes 83 days to get through. So the Senate has what they call the filibuster, right? During a filibuster, I can talk about anything I want to talk about, and I will just continue talking. Now, as soon as I can't talk anymore, I either have to hand off to someone else or the vote gets to happen. But Southern senators were able to talk for 83 days straight, from morning until evening, 83 days straight, to ensure that the Civil Rights Act didn't get passed. Normally, while you're speaking, you're going around trying to get other people to back off their vote. But Johnson is more effective, Johnson is more powerful than all of these Southern senators. And so even after the 83-day filibuster, the Civil Rights Act is passed. Now, if you're not happy with the law, what's your next step?
Try to change it.
Okay. I can go to the Supreme Court, right? And say this law is illegal. So the Heart of Atlanta Motel goes to the Supreme Court and says, you cannot force me to have a certain group of people in my hotel. And what does the Supreme Court say?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. They say it is perfectly fine to say that you will have to treat every American in the same way. And if you are offering white people the chance to stay in your hotel, then you will also offer African American people the right to stay in your hotel. And so once that happens, it's a done deal. They do pass the 24th Amendment. I apologize, it says 15 and I could not fix the slide. But they passed the 24th Amendment that bans poll taxes. And so by this time, very few people have poll taxes. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is Vietnam. We have already kind of gotten involved in Vietnam in terms of sending money, sending support, sending advisors, right? But to this point, the only U.S. personnel that have been sent are advisors who are supposed to teach them how to fight. Admittedly, once you're over there in the fight, a lot of guys went ahead and fought. But the official stance of the U.S. government was, no, this is just advisors. So all of a sudden, we have U.S. ships that are signals intelligence ships going in to listen to the North Vietnamese while they are fighting with the South, and we are gathering intelligence and providing that intelligence to people that we think need to know it. The North Vietnamese notices that there are ships who are present every time that there's an attack going on, and they believe that the ships are supporting the conflict. So they send out some small boats to attack the ships. The U.S. Navy has the ability to protect itself, so they fight off the small boats and they pull out. A couple days later, they come back in to listen again, and this time there's a huge storm. In the storm, they believe that they are seeing an attack again. It is almost guaranteed at this point that the second attack never happened. It was just overwhelmed sailors who were listening and watching the radar, and the radar is messing up. And so the next thing you know, they're calling in airstrikes, they're calling in support, and they're saying, hey, we're being attacked again. This goes up to DC, and Johnson sees the opportunity. And he says, the North Vietnamese are attacking U.S. Navy ships, and we need to be able to respond. Congress immediately passes the joint resolution, and it authorizes Johnson to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. Now, when you hear that, what does that mean? Do whatever it takes. And this is what Johnson says. Johnson, as I said, is a little crass. He says, this is just like grandma's nightshirt. It covers everything it needs to, right? And so he goes ahead and sends U.S. troops into Vietnam. And this is when you start to see the first deployment of combat troops. All right. Next thing that comes up is the election of 1964. In the election of 1964, this is, how many times has Johnson been elected? He hasn't. He took over for Kennedy. So, is Johnson eligible for election? Yes. So the Democrats nominate Lyndon Johnson. There is some crisis over the election process because during this time, Mississippi actually brings in two groups of electors. There is one that is African American and there is one that is white. What does the Constitution say about that?
You can only have one group.
Yeah, you can only have one group. It doesn't say what to do if you have two. So they try to resolve this and they say, okay, we're going to kind of mix everybody together, and that just infuriates everybody. At the end, Johnson is selected. The Republicans nominate Barry Goldwater, who is a senator from the Southwest. He is very conservative, and he says the Democrats are moving far to the left. We're going to move far to the right. He picks up his vice president is the former commander of the Strategic Air Command, and Curtis LeMay. And so everyone sees him as kind of a warmonger, and so this is how Johnson tries to portray him. Why doesn't Nixon run? Nixon lost his last governor election in California, and he figures if he can't take the state of California, he's not going to run for a national office. So usually I have some advertisements. I will see if I can pull them up really quickly. And I want you guys to have a perspective. All right. We may just do one, but. All right. Sadly, I don't have sound right now. So I will try to walk you through this. She is counting off the petals, and you guys can just look up Daisy ad. But you hear her counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you hear an outside voice saying 10, 9, 8, 7. Now, what does that automatically give you a perspective from? Anybody watch any war movies? All right. And so then you see the explosion of a nuclear war. And Johnson says, or the background voice says, the stakes are life and death in this election process. Vote for Johnson. The stakes are too high to do anything else. So the main thing that we see in these ads is the push for fear. It's no longer we just want to help you. Here's some logic on why you need to vote for this person, but it's if you don't vote for this candidate, you will all die, right? Do we see some of that in our current elections? Yeah. And this is kind of the process that you see this build, is these elections, these ads that are based more on fear than they are on logic, more of, if you don't do this, the entire world will be destroyed, so you have to vote for me. So they actually work really well. Johnson wins 61% of the popular vote. Now, I will say that particular ad, I believe, only ran one time, but there are several others similar to it. And this is one of the first elections that you see African Americans supporting the Democrats. So, why would African Americans support Johnson? Johnson's background is poverty in Texas. He went to the University of Texas. He got a job as a teacher, teaching in a very impoverished area of Southwest Texas. And so he says, you know what? I want to fix poverty. I want to make it so people don't have to be poor. So he says, I'm going to build a great society. I am going to be a more effective president. I'm going to accomplish more for the poor than FDR did. Now, why would he use FDR as his model? What did FDR come into office facing? The Depression, right? So he's saying, I'm going to fix poverty like FDR fixed depression. And so first, he passes the Voting Rights Act. Then he establishes Medicare and Medicaid. You see Head Start, Work Study, Job Corps, federal aid to schools. All of those things are to try to help people improve their lives, right? HUD, what does HUD do? Anybody know? They build low-cost housing so that if you don't have a lot of money, you can pay less money, and if your income is under a certain amount, you get federally supported housing. Water Quality Act, Motor Vehicle Air Pollution Act, those are more environmental, but a lot of the first ones are really trying to help out the poor. He also does provide endowments for the humanities and for the arts, which again causes some people who are like, wait a minute, if you're poor, you should be out working in a regular job, a real job, not working in the arts. Now, I know artists would be very upset with that statement. But the other piece that he does is the INS, Immigration and Nationality Services Act. So everybody that comes into the U.S., for every 17 people coming outside of the Americas, 12 need to be able to come from inside the Americas. Now, we already have laws that say if you have family, then you're not counted in this, right? So what does this mean realistically? Like over a third of all immigration at this point comes in from Mexico and Central and South America, right? So it changes the face of the average immigrant coming into the U.S. Other than this, there's only 20,000 people per country for those outside of the Americas. All right. One of the things that really shocks Johnson is he is pushing for African American rights. He has pushed through the Civil Rights Act. So he believes African Americans are going to love him and they're going to be super happy. Is this necessarily the case? No. And in fact, it's interesting if you look, a lot of times when you get people rising up against their governments, it's not when their government treats them horribly. How many people do you believe are up, trying to overthrow the government of North Korea? Very few. Why?
They'll just kill you.
They'll just kill you. So if I try to overthrow the government, they will kill me and they will probably destroy my family. You just take the beatings and you just let it go. So why do you think when he is improving the rights of African Americans that African Americans start to rise up against the local and state and federal government? It gives them hope. And they say, look, you've given us a little, but we want more, right? We want a greater amount of rights. We want more than what we are getting, and so we're going to push to get there. They are already pushing, but with the new excitement of getting some of the gains, they're like, no, we want more. So the Harlem riot actually starts out with some kids sitting on the stoop of a store, and the store owner comes out and says, hey, get off the stoop. We want you guys, move along. I want my customers to be able to come in. They say, you can't do anything about it. So he walks over to the side of the store, gets the hose, and starts to spray them down. Not very kind, right? One of the kids turns and grabs a knife and starts to attack him with the knife. An off-duty policeman comes into the situation and he sees a store owner with a hose and a kid with a knife. Who is he going to support?
The kid.
Actually, he supports the store owner and he shoots the kid because the kid has a knife. And he's like, this kid is attacking the store owner. And so he shoots the kid. This immediately causes problems because this young man is 15 years old. And they say, why is a policeman shooting a 15-year-old? You should have done something different, right? We've heard that recently. Why are you shooting someone? Use different methods. So starting with Harlem, they attacked the police precinct. As the news media shows this, it expands to numerous other cities. Martin Luther King Jr. does not support this. he says, hey, we're trying to be nonviolent. We don't want to attack people. We need to go in and show them with appropriate behavior that other people are attacking us. However, he is now assassinated by James Earl Ray, and this heightens the frustration of the African American community because they're like, you know, we are responding to people being killed, but even when people tried to do things in the appropriate way, even when Martin Luther King Jr. tries to not use violence, he's killed. And so you have people like Malcolm X that come out. Malcolm X grew up and his dad was a pastor. As he grew up, his parents died. He was frustrated with the system, wound up going to prison. While he's in prison, he joins the Nation of Islam. Now, the Nation of Islam has some pretty crazy thoughts. They actually believe that the entire world was filled with black people, and that an evil wizard created white people to make the lives of black people miserable. There is no science behind this, but it's a good way to frustrate people and to say that race is bad, correct? So in the same way that white people used the evolution to say that black people are not appropriate, African Americans now say that white people are not appropriate. So if you think that all white people are out there just to make your life miserable, what do you think you should do if you're African American? Get rid of them. We need to segregate and have white areas and black areas, and white people should not be anywhere where black people are. Black people should not be anywhere where white people are, right? And so it's amazing that over and over we try to desegregate, we try to bring people together to show them, hey, we're all people and we can do the same things. And then various groups of people work extremely hard to rip us apart again based on race or other problems. So he goes to Saudi Arabia and he goes into the Hajj, and while he is at the Hajj, he says, wait a minute, all the stuff I was taught about white people treating us horribly is not necessarily the case. People are treating me nicely, it's not a big deal. And he comes back and he starts to preach the new guidance, and he's killed by the same people that he was part of, the Nation of Islam. So again, trying to force this separation. All right. You have Stokely Carmichael. He is brought into the SNCC in May of 1966. Sorry. When he starts, he is very much into nonviolence, right? But over time, he says, nonviolence isn't working. We're going to press for black power. Instead of having nonviolence, we are going to control our own destiny. We are going to become our own police force. We are going to become our own protective device. We're going to become our own army, and we are going to protect ourselves against whites. One of the key things that happens is when James Meredith, the guy that goes into Ole Miss, tries to walk from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, and he is shot. Now, he is not killed, but it's pretty sad when you're just trying to walk down the street and you're shot. So he expels all whites from the SNCC, and he says we want to smash everything that Western civilization has created. Now, that's a big deal, right? If you smash everything Western civilization has created, what are you getting rid of? Okay, commerce, houses, government, right? And so he actually decides that he wants to get rid of capitalism. He meets with communists and he joins the Black Panthers, and then he moves to Africa because he says, I don't even want to live with the US. The Black Panthers start in October of 1966, and they start out saying, we're going to police our own neighborhoods. We're going to be the people that take care of our citizens. We don't want the police here. And in fact, when the police were called into black neighborhoods, the Black Panthers would attack the police because they say, you guys are not here to help us. You're here to harm us. And so we will take care of things, right? They later became a Marxist organization, again, believing that capitalism was tied to white supremacy. This keeps coming up, which is a crazy idea. Capitalism has been going on for millennia, and the only time that I've heard this racism is absolutely tied to capitalism is after you see Marxism roll in. All right, so you're fighting, there's two big wars happening at the same time, right? The African Americans against the government and the Vietnam War. So what happens in the Vietnam War? Johnson has sent troops in, right? But Johnson decides, I don't want to have any chance of getting into a conflict with the Soviets or with the other communist governments. So how do I fight a war without getting into the situation where I'm fighting these major governments? Any thoughts? He wants to run the war from DC. He will tell everybody what's going to be done and what is not going to be done, right? And that is going to protect the US. He is going to signal the North Vietnamese. I am going to let you know that we're going to accomplish what we need to, and we're going to take steps to win this war. Now, if you're the North Vietnamese, remember, who have you fought to this point? The Tonkins, I said, have for hundreds of years fought the Chinese, right? Do you think the Chinese signaled, hey, we're going to defeat you, and so you might as well surrender?
Yes.
Okay. Realistically, the Chinese just came in and beat you down. So there's no signals going on, right? When the French came in, do you think they gave signals that, hey, we're going to colonize you? Or do you think they just came in and said, we're going to take you over, and they did? Nobody wants to talk.
They just took over.
They just took over. When the Japanese roll in World War II, do you think they signal, hey, we're going to take over, and so you can go ahead and surrender? Or did they just come in and take over? They just came in and take over, right? So why does Johnson think this new signaling thing is going to have an impact?
They don't want to pick a fight with the US.
Yeah, he thinks, well, I'll just let them know and we'll roll into it gradually. Now, the main reason he does this is not to win the war. The main reason he does this, do you remember earlier I said he has a different war that he's fighting? What war is he attempting to win? When he first came into office, he said, I want to be like FDR, right? What is he fighting? What did FDR fight? Okay. the Depression. He came in and he's fighting poverty. So can Johnson fight a war against poverty and fight a war in Vietnam? What happens normally in a war, you start spending loads and loads of money, right? Because you have to put effort toward winning the war. So Johnson looks at this and he says, if I fight the Vietnam War with loads of money and loads of people, I won't have the ability to have the great society and fight my war on poverty. Which is more important for Johnson? I'll give you a hint. He's signaling in the war on Vietnam. Right? No one else signals because you just go in and you fight the war and you win. So if he's just signaling in Vietnam, what's his priority? The war on poverty. And so he does not want to fight the Vietnam War. He wants to make it as short and as easy as possible. Now, this is a problem. When you fight a war, you have to actually be willing to fight the war, right? You can't say, hey, I'm just going to give it a little bit of attention, a little bit of time, a little bit of money, a little bit of bodies. And so the second problem he has is when he's in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese have sent down people and they are in a lot of the rural areas. It takes a lot of time to sit down and figure out who are the good guys versus who are the bad guys. So it's much easier, instead of saying, hey, who are the good guys and the bad guys, let's just go in and we will try to take out what we believe are the bad guys. We can't control the territory because to control the territory you would need lots of manpower, lots of money, and lots of energy, right? So if you're not going to control the war, if you're not going to deem that you win when you take property, what is the only other way Johnson feels like he can determine we win the war? And I will give you a hint. Body counts. What does body counts mean?
How many kills you got?
All right. So if I kill more of you than you kill of me, then I win, right? There's a problem with this. Now, if I am all about, I'm not taking territory, I am not controlling territory, I am determining I win by the people I kill. Is there any chance that somebody is going to say, I just need to kill more people, whether they're good or bad? Yeah. The other thing, and we see this in Vietnam, is I will come to a village and I know there's bad guys in the village and they have come and they have attacked us. So I come into the village and I am going to try to attack the village. I come in and I take out 5 or 6 people that I believe are bad people, and then I say, is there any other bad people here? And everybody in the town says no, right? So I walk back and I go back to my area, and what do you think happens? You guys are not talking today. Do you think there's any chance that there's still a couple bad guys there? Yes. And what are those bad guys going to do as soon as I walk away?
Shoot.
They're going to shoot at me. And so now I have to come back to this village, and who are the bad guys? I don't know. So after I've come back to this village 4 or 5 times, what am I going to assume? Do I think that most people in the village are good and there's just a few bad guys? No. I think, okay, you're all bad guys, right? Now, why would the people in the village not tell me who the bad guys are?
They don't trust you.
Yes, this is what we faced in Iraq. When we went into Iraq, we would go out and we would try to pacify a city, and then we would pull back to our area where it's safe. None of the people in this village are safe, right? And so they're scared. So when we come out and we say, who are the bad guys? They're like, yeah, I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to tell you, you're going to take out one or two bad guys, but the people that are left are going to kill me. So they're like, I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to help you when you are coming in and then walking away. So when I think this entire town is bad, how do I respond as a military guy? I shoot everybody, right? Now, is there any credibility to the fact that a little kid could try to harm a military person in Vietnam? Yes. Is there any credibility to the fact that a woman or an old person could harm a U.S. military soldier in Vietnam? Yes. So there is some credibility and there is a lot of fear, and we fight the way, it's probably the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You go in and you only serve 1 year. In World War II, you go in and you fight till the war is done. In World War I, you go in and you fight until the war is done. In Korea, you go in and you fight until the war is done, right? The fact that I only have a 1 year wartime means what? By the time I get to 11 months, is my goal to win this war, or is my goal to get back to the U.S. safely? I just want to get back to the U.S. safely, right? And so a lot of the soldiers are like, I just want to be safe, and if I need to, I'll take out this village. I will kill everybody in the village to make sure that I get back safe. And as a side effect, what does that do to my body count?
Pumps it up.
It looks really good because, look, I killed 30 people who are really bad people. But are they really bad people? Who knows? So Johnson is trying to signal without fighting. He's coming up with different ways to ensure that we look good instead of necessarily winning the war. He lies to the American people about how the war is going. He keeps saying, you know what? We're winning, we're almost there. It's just going to take that next step. And then we have draft policies. All right. Makeda. Should I start with rich or poor? You're going to be rich or you're going to be poor?
I guess whatever's fine.
Pick one.
Poor.
Okay, you're poor. I'm the draft board. You come in and you say, hey, I don't think I should go to Vietnam because realistically, I have this old injury and it hurts every time I walk. What do you think I'm going to say to you?
We need people, so
Yeah, we need people, so suck it up. You know what? I'm sorry you hurt, but get over it because you need to go to war. Jake, you're rich. So I come to you and I say, hey, we need you for the war. And you go, you know, I got this thing. I get hangnails sometimes. And those hangnails hurt like nobody's business. And what do you think we say?
You'll be fine. Or, it's fine, we don't need you.
Yeah, your daddy's important. So, you know what? I understand. I've had hangnails and they're, I can barely stand it. We should probably let you come in. Do you see the problem here? So who is going to war? Poor people. People that don't have influence. People whose families are important, people whose families have influence are not going. How does this impact the war? If I have influence, if I have the ability to determine what happens electorally in our U.S. government, and you send my kid to war and you're doing stupid things with that child, what am I going to do? I'm going to be angry, and I'm going to say, stop the war or fix how you're fighting it. But if my kid's not involved and the only people involved are poor people, then how much influence do the poor people, the non-influential people, have? Very little, right? And so at first, you just have the rich and the poor. And he says, you know what? If you're going to college, we're going to give you an exemption. You don't have to fight if you're in college. So how many people start going to college? Loads of people, right? And when you get done with your bachelor's, then you need a master's. And when you get done with your master's, you need a PhD. And a lot of the college professors actually frustrate me because they played into it. If you came to college and you didn't do your work prior to this, you failed, right? But some of the college professors said, well, if I give you an F, then you're going to fail out of college and you will be sent to Vietnam. So therefore, even if you don't come to class, I will give you at least a C so you won't fail out of college. Now, what does that mean for this divide between the rich and the poor? If I'm poor, do I have the money to just go to college the rest of my life? No. So again, we're already treating the rich and poor differently, right? And now there's this added layer of, if you have the money to spend on college, then you don't have to go to the war. But if you don't have the money to go to college, then you do. You also have a bunch of people who decide that they are going to leave for Canada, or you have, so President Clinton went to Canada, President Bush went the other direction. I am going to join the National Guard. Now it's interesting because normally the National Guard is brought up and sent to war. But Johnson chooses not to send the National Guard to war. Why? Because the kids who were kids of very influential and politically powerful people joined the Guard, and he doesn't want to tick them off. So do you see a trend developing here? Are we truly trying to fight this war? No. We are trying to not lose the war while we're fighting the war on poverty. And it's intriguing because what are we doing to the war on poverty because of the Vietnam War? We're sending the poor people to die and to get injured. And we're telling the rich people they don't have to go. So it really frustrates me that Johnson's all about this war on poverty, but then he kind of flips the script, right? And he says, if you're poor, go die in the war for us, but if you're wealthy, you stay here and you don't have to worry about it. All right, so the signaling in Vietnam allows North Vietnam to build up their defenses. Every time we're like, okay, we're gonna escalate just a little bit, and they say, okay, then we can go ahead and build here, and then every time we push a little higher, they push a little higher. I truly believe, and I cannot swear to this is not historical, but I wonder what would have happened had we gone in and chosen to fight the war and been done. No one knows, because it's anti-historical. But while we move up slowly, they move up slowly. They also start infiltrating into Laos and Cambodia, which we say we cannot fight in. So again, we put up a barrier to our own soldiers saying they can go over there and they can attack you from Laos and Cambodia, but you can't go over there and fight. So they build up the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we can't do anything about it. A lot of this now creates this domestic opposition. A lot of the universities start to take the information from the North Vietnamese, rather than the U.S., and they trust the North Vietnamese more than they trust their own government, and start saying, hey, this war is not appropriate, we should not do this. And it finally gets to the Tet Offensive. In the Tet Offensive, the first part of the war is the U.S. has strong military forces and the North Vietnamese have strong military forces, and we just destroy them. So they go to the guerrilla war and they are fighting, and we are destroying them with the guerrilla war. So they finally decide, okay, what we need to do is we will push back really hard on the time when everybody goes on vacation. So Tet is their New Year's Day. It's sort of like Christmas in the U.S. Everybody goes home, everybody takes a vacation, but on that day, the North Vietnamese push and they break into several of the cities, take over several of the cities, and they actually break into the U.S. Embassy for just a few minutes. And so they are on the embassy grounds. Meanwhile, all of the press in Vietnam takes pictures of this, right? Because now they say, wait a minute, the North Vietnamese are attacking in force and they are winning. Johnson has been saying, hey, we're winning, we're winning, and we're winning, we're almost there. And all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, the North Vietnamese are doing really well. They just beat us back. Now, within a few days, and in a couple cases, within like a couple months, we have driven them back. We killed lots and lots of North Vietnamese. But what do the American people see on TV? We're not winning because they can come in and attack us. And so this is something that turns a lot of the American people against the war itself. And they say, why are we fighting over here? We don't understand. You keep lying to us about what is going on. And so it costs a lot of support for the Vietnam War. All right. So this is the first part of the Johnson administration. I will go ahead and walk through. What is the Civil Rights Act? What does it do?
And segregation.
Okay, it ends segregation in areas that have interstate commerce, right? So we're expanding what we are accomplishing. How does Johnson get it passed?
Puts a lot of pressure on Congress.
Okay, puts pressure on Congress. Hey, President Kennedy wanted this, and you don't want to be against the dead president, right? The president that was assassinated and everybody knows, kind of like the 9/11 thing. He also uses the Johnson technique of getting up in your personal space and making you feel uncomfortable, right? So what's the impact? Does it have an impact? Yes. And it has enough of an impact that they actually take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, we're good. So what is Johnson's Great Society?
His plan to help end poverty.
He has a plan to end poverty, right? Realistically, how successful is it? This started in 1960, so before all of us were born, right? How many people were in poverty then? Okay. It's interesting. The bad part is the U.S. actually defines poverty by the percentage of people. And so poverty can't be reduced. When you define it by a percentage, you're definitionally creating a certain group of people that will always be in poverty. All right, so Johnson's Great Society is not, it has some success, but overall there's still poor people. All right, so how does the Tonkin Gulf Resolution lead to the Tet Offensive? what happens in the Tonkin Gulf resolution?
We decided to put troops on the ground.
Okay, we've put troops on the ground. And that's the key thing that I want you guys to recognize. If we had not put troops on the ground, could you have the Tet Offensive? Why?
Because we wouldn't be fighting against them, so they wouldn't be fighting against us.
Yeah. We would not be watching American soldiers getting hit by North Vietnamese troops if there are no American soldiers there, right? So this is one where I want you guys to actually use some critical thinking skills and say, hey, if we hadn't gone in, then we would not be able to have, been fighting, and we wouldn't lead to the Tet Offensive. All right. So for Wednesday, we're going to be walking through a lot of the revolutions. The 60s has a lot of pushback. So you have women, you have gays, you have African Americans, you have Hispanics, you have Native Americans, and they're all pushing back saying, hey, we want greater rights. We want more effective rights. So that's what we will be discussing on Wednesday. All right. Any questions on today? Sadly, I will probably be letting you guys out a little bit early. So, all right. I will talk to you Wednesday, and have a good afternoon.